Hi, I'm David from EVWorld News. We're talking about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. Today's Wednesday. I have engineer Mike Herzog with us today. Hey, Mike.
Glad to be here, David.
And glad to have you. And also, I have a special guest today. I have David from Red Pill News. We're here to give us a conservative perspective on some of the topics we're going to cover today. How's it going, David?
It's going great. Glad to be with y'all. This is a fascinating topic, and it's going to really dominate the 21st century, at least the first half of it, the rest of the first half.
Well, we're excited to have you on here. It certainly can give some different perspective to what we've got going on, and we're already getting comments going, which is nice. So we're going to start out. We're going to talk about a article that came to us. This was from Reuters, talking about White House to support new nuclear plants in the U.S. And this is interesting because I'm in the green energy space, but I support nuclear. Okay, I think it's dumb that we're closing down nuclear because I think people are getting smarter. I mean, 3 Mile Island was the last nuclear incident in the United States that I'm aware of. Other than my dad was a nuclear firefighter, he used to pull nuclear bombs out of plane crashes.
Wow. That's a tough generation right there.
Yeah, he did it 3 times. 3 times he had to recover nuclear bombs from crashed aircraft in the United States. Yeah, so think about that. It's one of those things like, hey, it's a non-stress job. It's either you're here, everything's fine, or you're not there anymore, right?
Radiation poisoning. Yeah.
Right. And anyways, but so let me pull up this article here from Reuters. And let's get started with this. It'll pop up here. Oh, yeah, taxing my system. So White House to support new nuclear plants in the United States. Now, this is kind of interesting because the current administration has not been that big on, they've been big on green energy and green projects and all that, but nuclear is always kind of left out of the commentary. And it's always been fascinating to me how some people don't believe this. I do believe in the transition to green energy, okay? But I believe nuclear is part of it. We have hydroelectric, we have solar, we have wind, and we have battery arrays. And I don't think many people are aware of how battery arrays are going on right now in terms of energy uses. We have 2 states that are already big in battery arrays, and that's Nevada and Hawaii. Hawaii has replaced all of their coal-fired power plants with battery arrays now. And Tesla was big behind that. In the Hawaii one, Tesla, I think.
I believe so, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, but anyways, so this article, the White House on Wednesday plans to announce new measures to support the development of new U.S. nuclear power plants, potential source of carbon-free electricity. The government has says is needed to combat climate change. You know what's interesting? Amazon bought their own nuclear power plant to power up one of their data centers. And
they're going to need it with the AI data. They're going to have to put those under the ocean and the Arctic. They're going to get so hot, so much energy. That's going to be a whole energy infrastructure project in itself, from my remedial understanding. Just powering
it's the biggest driver right now. It's the biggest driver of growth we're seeing, and it is through the roof. How much energy that, when you couple it with like crypto and some of those other processing areas, that's where the industry is growing right now. That's truly where all the big megawatt numbers are coming from. Data.
What did the OpenAI founder say he wanted? He wanted like 1.5 trillion or something crazy like that.
Oh, for grid infrastructure?
Yeah, just to specifically for AI.
Yeah. I can believe it.
Yeah, it's nuts. This is kind of weird. So if you do a OpenAI or ChatGPT search, it uses 10 times as much energy as doing a basic Google search. Okay.
Wow, that's a lot.
But the thing is, when we use our computer and we use Google or something like that, we don't really think about, I just burned a whole bunch of electricity. You didn't burn a whole lot.
Yeah.
You burned very little. But we're just saying that if all of a sudden everybody switches from using Google as their choice to one of the AI generators, all of a sudden you've increased the energy requirements for that by 10x. And Elon Musk said that next year we're going to have major issues worldwide with energy because of all of the AI needs that are coming out. AI is going to require more and more juice. It's not EVs that are sucking the power out of the grid.
No, they're a drop in the bucket today, compared to the data center needs and everything. EVs, we talk in terms of kilowatts, which is, familiar to your house, what it looks like. Data centers, you talk in terms of hundreds of megawatts, up to, a gigawatt kind of data use when it goes through. So it's a different level of scale.
The issue I've heard, and maybe it's no longer an issue, was just concurrent charging nationwide in certain areas. Is that still an issue, or is that no longer?
Yeah, that's still the issue, and really what you see with it in that space, it's a human behavior. This is what a lot of it is. It's when the grid is the most stressed. It's a hot day. It's 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, the hottest day of the year, and everybody gets home and cranks down their AC and turns on the oven and turns on the washer and the lights and the TV and everything like that. So it's the concurrent part of that where it really starts to pop up. And you think of human behavior. What do you do when you get home if you have an EV? Well, I'm going to plug it right into the wall too. I'm done for the day, just like my cell phone or anything else that you would do. So it's it's an issue with the behavior and the concurrency of it, where if it's left kind of unmitigated, it all piles on where we really don't want it to. So I'm in the industry, I'm in the utility space, and that's really what we're focusing on right now is how do you get people to charge overnight when there's this valley, when it's nice and cool and we've got all this capacity, we have all this space. Can you charge overnight rather than when it's worse for the grid out there?
Well, if you look at California has this huge mismatch when power is, because they've really gone green. Solar is ideal between like 11 and 2. And wind energy is best between like midnight and 2 a.m. Okay. And they need all the power they can get between about 4 and 9. Okay. So they don't want people they want people to figure out how to cool their house down. I've seen people with smart energy systems to cool your house down before 4 o'clock and then only charge your EV after 11 p.m. And so there's technology out there that can address some of this, but California probably needs some nuclear power plants. Got a lot of people.
How long do you think it's going to take before? I've read various estimates that it could take 30 years to get what we need in the infrastructure. And I've also heard, I don't know for a fact, but that we're more vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses than some countries with newer infrastructures. You're talking about California. I was curious why they haven't desalinated their water. That probably takes a ton of energy. And I'm just ready for fusion in general. That's probably 40 years before that's mass adapted. But last thing I'll say, I know this is a lot of topics back to back. This is, I guess, a conspiracy theory. I've heard a couple sources say there are private entities that are preventing solar panels from being as efficient as they could be. Like they don't want them to eat up too much of some other industry, so they're paying the. Have y'all heard anything about that, or is that insane?
I don't know anything about that personally. I think there's a lot of research going on in that space. There's a lot of new developments. There's a lot of those elements out there now. You can talk about market conditions. You can talk about what gets subsidized, what doesn't. What people are pushing, how people are going. But from a broad perspective, I think there's enough money out there that some people would fight through some of those things and try to get figured out from installing new panels. But I don't know anything about that last one on there.
So Patrick Bet-David brought up, and he's been talking about this a lot, about all of these patents that the U.S. military has swallowed up. And supposedly, if you make solar panels that are over 20% efficient, the government claims ownership of the patent, or they won't let or they'll pay the owner. They won't let them take it public. Now, I do know that I do a lot of consulting for a lot of different companies, and I was approached about a deal of a Israeli company that went bankrupt during COVID that supposedly had 80% efficient panels. Wow. And so I thought this was going to be game changing, but they ended up couldn't find the money for the deal keep the company afloat. But what happened was they had been doing installations, and then when COVID hit, they couldn't travel anymore to support those installations. And they got sued in Italy, and it put them out of business.
Ooh.
And
Well, there you go.
it was an interesting case back then, but I really don't know. I mean, I'm under the impression that there is the possibility. So a group that I'm friends with, they have a technology that is a coating. It's a nano coating that can go on solar panels that is supposed to make them, about another. So if you're 20% efficient now, it might up it to 30% efficient. So I know there's technologies out there to improve stuff, but this would be an aftermarket coating to go back and improve people's solar. It does seem to make sense. You should be able to get more juice out of solar panels than just have 20% efficiency. I mean, you think about it, if birds land on the damn things, the birds can get fried. Okay. So, birds seem to know better when they start getting close to it, how hot the panels are, but it's,
and the windmills with the birds. I don't know how, I haven't looked into it a lot. I don't know how common that is, but you see the videos of birds flying into the turbines.
We have a couple of bridges here in Omaha that are really well known for killing birds. Yeah. So, so never mind the windmills.
Because I've been on the other side of it, and it all depends on which bird flies into it. If it's a migratory bird, you're writing a full report. You are contacting that bird's next of kin, and figuring out what happened and everything. And it does happen. It's a space out there. It's not as common as you would think. Actually, National Geographic did a study on it, and they said it wasn't as common as the stray cats, and things like that really, really decimate the bird population out there. But it does happen, and if it's a bald eagle, if it's a crane, if it's an owl, something like that, you are filling out some forms and figuring out what happened.
So, what percentage of the solar panels are still made in China, and do you foresee in the future we'll be able to get away from? I know we're straying a little bit from electric vehicles, so
but that's okay. That's okay. We like talking anything in the green energy space. So one of the things, and I do know solar panels are made in the United States, but the manufacturers are Japanese. I know Sharp makes solar panels in the United States. Okay.
Well, so Japanese make some. Their quality is great. I'm concerned when I hear about the electric vehicles from China. Y'all, again, might know more, but from just the initial reports I've heard, their quality control is garbage. That's what the mainstream articles on the left and the right are saying, is that quality control, Chinese electric, is going to be trash.
On the solar?
So, no, electric vehicles specifically.
Well, so here's kind of the thing. Elon Musk says that the Chinese EV makers are the real major leagues of auto manufacturing. So he said that Americans who are believing that are really missing out, because what's going to happen is, and this is the danger. So we've got the big three plus Tesla. Now Tesla is technically worth as much as the other three companies alone in stock market value, and that could have changed, but I know they were worth more than them. But what I'm getting at is, I think we have a duty as a country to protect those jobs and all that, but they need to get their shit together and start making EVs that make money. Because right now, Tesla makes money on EVs, Volvo, Hyundai and Kia, and BYD. Okay, when they sell EVs, they make money. Okay, almost all the other companies that make EVs, Mercedes, BMW, Ford, GM, Volkswagen, they don't.
They're having to sell their $100,000 F-150s, which, I mean, if you got a lot of money, fine, but I would never spend $100,000 on an F-150. Goodness gracious, the car, like the used and new car market has just gone insane. I don't know if that has affected EVs less, more, or the same, but hopefully we're near the end of this bubble of wild vehicle prices.
I will say it's very funny when we look at these articles. A lot of them will be titled like EV prices through the roof or EV sales slump, and there's no mention of internal combustion engines. So yes, in short, they are impacted, just like all the car market, all the prices, all the used vehicle scarcity and increase in costs. But it's very funny. We see it in this space a lot where they are called out independently, and it's just EVs are struggling. So, well, everybody's struggling. It's a tough space. It's a tough world out there for everybody right now.
It is, but I thought it was so brilliant how Musk, the strategy he used. I was listening to this entrepreneur. He started in doing gyms. I'm trying to think of his name. He wrote $100 million leads and $100 million offer. Alex Hermosi. Yeah. He said, look at what Elon Musk said. You can either serve a lot of people and help them a little bit like Netflix, or you can help a few rich people. And he's like, Elon got these high-end electric vehicles when they were first out to wealthy people, and then he scaled after doing that. I guess that's the only way you could have done it. How else could you have funded like going wide in the market like that? It seems
well, he got lucky a little bit too. For starters, when Tesla started getting to the point where they're releasing like the Model 3 and stuff like that, interest rates were really low. Okay. So interest rates, and you see this also in housing and everything else, but interest rates were really low. It helped really accelerate the sales of electric vehicles. People want to talk about government incentives and all that, but really it's interest rates that, people are concerned about their payments, things like that. Interest rates really help. Well, right now interest rates suck. And so you see, it's hurt the higher end EVs, but also you look at, F-150s and Rams and Chevy Silverados, they're all stacked up on lots. I mean, there is no shortage of full-size pickup trucks available to buy right now, and they're just really overpriced. And
they really are. What year was that Tesla you just mentioned? Was that like 2017, 2018?
So I think and I get mixed up on the years sometime. I think the Model 3 came out in 2017 or 18, and the Y I think came out in 19. But the Model Y is the best-selling car in the world. It's not in the United States. The F-150 is still number one in the U.S., but the Tesla Model Y is the best-selling car in the world, and it's an American car. And one of the challenges here is the Chinese BYD. Their goal is to uproot Toyota as the number one car seller in the world. And they're well on their path. Mike was down in Costa Rica, and he saw BYD's, the one that sells for like $10,000. Yeah, he saw them down there.
Wow! And
they're going to absolutely take over, in about 90 countries they sell in, and not worry about the United States.
And they're dominating us in mineral rights too, aren't they? Aren't they going to Africa promising infrastructure in exchange for mineral rights?
It's a big deal. It's a big deal in African continent. I have some friends who work in that space, and what they look at, and they say they show up with briefcases full of cash, and we're going to make this happen, and they want to get into that space. It's a national security concern, at this point of where they're going and how deep they are invested in some of those spaces.
It sounds like it. I'm terrified of them taking that chip production in Taiwan. I know Taiwan has said we'll self-destruct it and stop those AI chips from getting in the hands of China, but that's really escalating. I know that they actually released naval mines into the water a few days ago. That's so much is escalating right now, but maybe we can keep their hands off of those, at least those AI chips, because they're the best ones.
In the
anyways,
announcement last month about the tariffs on EVs, I just saw one this morning on Chinese-made EVs. Europe is looking at instituting something very similar
next week.
Yeah,
we're doing it next week.
And going back to your kind of original question and comment, and how David followed up, like they're actually pretty good cars. At the end of the day, we're all surprised, right? We're all going, and they're making a quality automobile, and that's however they got there, whatever unfair practices they're doing or getting to that point. But it's cheap, and
I want you to think about a couple of things. For starters, NIO is a Chinese auto manufacturer that makes EVs only. They're on the New York Stock Exchange. Okay, BYD is 8% owned by Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway here in the United States, which is also here in Omaha, where we live. Okay, so BYD is Build your dreams. It's the Chinese company that
Okay.
is going to dominate. Now, BYD makes all kinds of stuff. They're the #1 company in the world for plug-in hybrids and for electric vehicles, or at least last year. Last year, they beat Tesla by like a few units in worldwide sales of all electric vehicles, but they're also #1 in plug-in hybrids. Okay. And their intention is to knock off the Toyota Corolla with some of their, as its
Wow.
spot in the world sales,
That's
with
a
some of their
legend.
inexpensive vehicles. They had just released a pickup truck called the Shark that they're selling overseas. And it's what's going to happen is it's going to push Tesla and the US big three out of those foreign markets. Already at the recent big auto show that happened over, I think it was in Beijing a couple months ago, people said the US cars, now it was an EV show. So Buick and Chevy sell EVs that in China that they don't sell in the United States. Most people don't know this. Buick has 4 different EVs they sell in China, but they don't stack up to the Chinese cars anymore. So they're really hurting for sales over there on those. So
that's really surprising. I guess it just takes a few decades to get very proficient at engineering. If they're producing the best, cheapest cars, then that sounds like a major component of economic domination. I don't know exactly how far their GDP is behind us, but also know they're facing a population crisis, and so are we. But also, we're going to have AI, automatron, robots in our factory soon. Also, it's a very interesting time. They say that the world wars are most likely to happen when one global power is about to surpass another, and feels like we're close with China. I don't know. At least seems like it.
We know the other thing is, in this space, we don't see India so much, but India's passed up China in population, and they're not going to have the population implosion that China's going to have over the next 20, 30 years. So they don't have any of that, one-child policy or anything like that was going on for a long time in China. And China's finally realized that doesn't work. But I don't know if they're going to be late to the game on that. But what I was going to tell you, there's about 100 EV manufacturers in China that make cars or car components. And there's a few of them that are really amazing. There's a whole bunch of them that are going to just disappear. Okay. So if you look at, I hear all the time, and this wasn't really one of our topics for today, is EV fires. Well, EV fires are most common not in EVs, but in plug-in hybrids. So plug-in hybrids have a really high rate of fires. It's twice that of gas cars, but full battery electric vehicles, it's only 1.5% of the rate by mileage driven of gas cars. So full electric vehicles rarely catch on
plug-in
fire.
Mechanisms, just so I make sure I understand you, the plug-in mechanisms pretty similar. It's just a matter of the hybrids are using gas and electric. The electrics are just using electric.
Yeah, if you have a plug-in hybrid, you might have a battery that has 50 miles of range on it, okay, which isn't very much, but that's enough for you to drive to work and back in most places without using gas. And
those batteries might be slightly different tech too. Then
but what's happening, and this is kind of true of gas cars too. Almost all of your fires are started by electrical faults, whether it be a gas car or an electric car, and because the plug-in hybrids basically have 2 systems, there's twice as big of a chance of them catching on fire as the others. Whereas the electric cars don't have their systems are more self-contained. The problem with an all-electric fire is the batteries are generally so large, there's so much energy there to burn off, it takes forever to put the fire out. And one of the things is you can't hit the fire with water unless you dunked it in a tank of water, because you can't spray a fire hose into the spot so you can deny it oxygen.
What's reacting with the water? Is it just a lithium molecule, or I don't know? Like
no. It's not the water itself. Right? It's not the water itself. What it is you have to snuff out the oxygen, and the water. So if there's damage to the battery and the battery catches on fire, it's kind of contained in the battery, and you can't spray, because of the design of the car. You can't spray the fire hose at the battery. Does that make sense? So you can't snuff out the oxygen to put out the fire like you would on a gas fire. So
that makes sense. I've got a question, 2 different questions, one for each of you. How are we on time? Are we going for 30 or an hour? I don't.
Oh, we'll go close.
wanna jump in.
We'll probably go at least 45 minutes. So we're
Okay,
good.
well, I can wait for later for those whatever you guys would like.
Yeah. So anyways, I wanted to talk a little bit about grid security. Okay. So this is one of the topics we hit on it just a little bit, but one of the concerns people always have is how EVs are going to be added to the grid. And we've done a couple of interesting things on this. So a new technology that came out a few years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, actually, is heat pump hot water heaters. So if you're in a warmer part of the United States, your hot water heater is electric. And there's a new type of energy efficient hot water tank that's called a heat pump hot water tank. The two coincidentally use about the same amount of energy, or the heat pump hot water heater saves about the same amount of energy an electric vehicle uses. So if you were going to charge about 10,000 miles a year of kilowatts into your car, you'd save the same amount just by swapping that out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that only count for one car if you get a 2-car household. Now, right now in the United States, people that own EVs own an average of 2.5 cars in their households. Okay, and only one is an EV. I do know people that have 3 EV households, but that's not really very common. Most people still have other cars. In Europe, most EV owners are part of a 1.5 average car. So there's a lot more 1-car households there that are just EVs. Whereas we don't have that so much here. And a little bit of it has to do with how people use it. But we're also in a country that doesn't use much mass transit. So here in the United States, we like our cars. We don't like buses. We don't like trains. We don't like bicycles.
And we're geographically way larger. There's all those memes of people say they're going to their grandma's over the weekend and it takes them 2 hours, someone in Great Britain. And then Americans like, oh, it takes me 13 to visit my grandmother. It's like,
right. Yeah. It's a completely different experience. But anyways, so one of the, we were talking about this with AI, and you might talk a little bit about how at the moment there's all kinds of energy sources want to connect to the grid, but they can't. What's going on there?
It's a backlog, and they call it the grid queue. And it started with wind farms about 10-15 years ago when they got significant government subsidies and people wanted to install them. And they became cost competitive all of a sudden, and it created this big backlog. Well, from a grid process, we were coal for 50 years, 70 years. We had some nuclear. We had what we'd call these base load units in there, and you'd build them really big, and you'd need to build one, every 10 or 15 years, something like that. It really wasn't something that came up a lot. So the dynamics of the grid, how it functions electrically, and how you put it into some of these places, it's a lot of study work. It's a balancing act. You have to figure it out. You have to do a whole heck of a lot of engineering, a lot of planning, a lot of understanding of how it's going to fit in. And when you didn't put those in very often, and I should say that's regionally, the United States was building a lot of plants. We were building a lot of nuclear, a lot of coal, all of that. But regionally, like if you were a local utility.
Are we talking about the huge transistors or a specific piece of hardware you're talking about, or just in general, infrastructure in general?
We got to add generation to the grid. We got to add power plant to the grid somewhere in a space like that. So we were built on, we had to study 1 or 2 at a time. We didn't have to look at all of them. And now when you're adding, 5, 10, 15, 20 in an area in a year, it takes time. We weren't built to study it. Our grid wasn't built to interconnect in all of these places. So in addition to putting in the power plant, you got to build new transmission. You got to figure out how the heck it's going to operate and everything along those lines.
Wow.
So it's a backlog, and we're doing it right so we don't break the grid. And that's where, from my standpoint, an engineer on that side, like pump the brakes. We have to pump the brakes. And this came back. It was probably about 2010. The Obama administration came out, with one of these big announcements. We're going to shut down coal. All coal plants are going to be shut down within a couple of years, and we're going to do it. And everybody at ours, you can't do that. Like the grid's going to collapse. Like you literally, and they backed off. They said, oh, okay, we didn't realize that was going to collapse the grid.
What are we at percentage wise right now of every energy source roughly for our power?
It's from an energy standpoint. I think we're 30 to 40% renewables at this point. Coal's gone way down.
Wow, nationwide. Wow.
So maybe I'm thinking locally. I'd have to pull that out.
It's about 22% wind, solar, and hydroelectric. It's about 18% nuclear, and then LNG is the big one. Okay, but coal is about 20% now.
And coal,
but you've got a few places in the United States that are almost 100% coal. Okay, yeah. So you still have those pockets, but for the most part,
we burn it clean, don't we? Like, don't we have better methods in China? Aren't they throwing up like
quite a bit? They call them
clean coal,
scrub houses, vacuum houses. Coal itself can be different. Wyoming coal is a lot different than West Virginia coal. Wyoming coal burns a lot cleaner than some of the other places.
Yeah, there's some blue collar places. I think whether you're running as a Democrat or a Republican, you're not getting elected if you use any rhetoric that would threaten those jobs, because that seems to be the last remnant of some blue collar jobs in some areas. And with this
like West Virginia.
Well, yeah, this transition we're about to go through. Yeah, it's going to be so many people losing their jobs, and I hope they can retool and retrain, but we're about to go through a fundamental transformation that's like, I don't know, maybe it won't be more than the last industrial revolution. It feels like it. We'll see. It's kind of scary.
It's a big deal.
Well,
it's a big deal out there for sure.
It's tough when some of those areas are single employer areas, and that's just really, I mean, you look at what happened with the great sucking noise of the 1990s when NAFTA was passed and all that manufacturing left. You had so many cities that just had one plant that supported the auto manufacturing business, and all the jobs went to Asia. And
Rust Belt destroyed. Yep.
Right. And we talked about this. We've done Ross Perot, episodes, how that could have saved that. But that's a, completely different, piece of all of this. I wanted to talk a little bit about, this is something as we're transitioning to electric vehicles. And a lot of people that are probably watching, listening, whatever, some of them probably just hate EVs. Okay. And I'm sure they've never driven one, for starters. But on almost every metric, EVs are starting to surpass gas cars with the exception of towing. Okay. But they are super inconvenient for somebody who lives in an apartment that doesn't own their own parking space. Okay. So, but as far as like fun to drive, safety, horsepower, and obviously,
that amount of time acceleration.
Yeah.
Going to space acceleration.
Yeah. Maintenance costs, all kinds of things that you just don't have to deal with. The number one thing that I see as a problem in a few years is probably still going to be towing. Towing is going to be a tough one to address. And it's a challenge. If you have a gas powered pickup truck, you certainly cut down, and you're towing a heavy trailer, you get far less gas mileage. Well, it works the same way with an EV. You get far less range. It's just, you don't want to be stopping to charge. We're starting to even see chargers that can add. Chargers have already been invented and are in place in a couple places in the United States. But when I say in place, I'm talking like a couple of charging stations. We're not talking hundreds of them, that can charge up to 200 miles on a battery in 5 minutes. Okay. Now, the cars to run that, it's out there, and it's only in a few cars are being produced this year that'll be able to accept that. So if you buy a used car or most 2024s or anything older than that, they're not going to be able to accept this new 800 volt charging speed. Okay. And
anything that'll help my cell phone charge faster. No, it's great it's great for cars too. That's awesome.
But once again, if it's charging faster, we have more infrastructure needs. If you go to we have Hy-Vee grocery stores. Is a big chain here. They're kind of competitive with like Kroger and other big grocery chains, but all of the Tesla supercharging stations in our part of the country are in Hy-Vee parking lots. Okay. Now the charging stations out in the parking lot they have more energy needs than the grocery store.
They have a higher power draw. The 4,000 square foot parking spaces have a higher draw than the 150,000 square foot grocery store.
Wow.
They just left it to their own devices. Yep.
Yeah.
So far, has there been anybody that's tried to like make an insane fee off of letting you charge? Or is I don't know if there's regulations for that. Like you can't charge too much more for a kilowatt hour. How's
they
that
have to?
No.
They have to. So and some public chargers are more expensive than gasoline. Okay.
They needed to reinvest in infrastructure. I'm guessing that's
here's the problem. Here's the problem right now, and I don't know what Tesla's numbers are, but for all the other companies that own charging networks, and a bunch of them are traded publicly, like ChargePoint and stuff like that. None of them make money off of EV charging because the usage isn't there yet to make it. So as usage and enough stations are put in place and there's enough users, those numbers will normalize and there'll be competitiveness just like there is with gas stations. So right now, people like, oh, it's $3.53 a gallon here, it's $3.51 a gallon across here. I'm going to one that's $3.51 a gallon, even though I have to go this big half-mile circle to get back and pull into their parking lot. It's inconvenient. People will do that. And
it's the same with gas stations. I mean, they don't make their money off gas. They make their money off big gulps and cigarettes. I mean, that's
true.
That's so if you can start going to more of that model and convenience with a convenience store, I think that helps sweeten the pot a little bit and keep the rates a little bit lower.
Tesla superchargers are only free if you bought a Tesla early enough that it came with free lifetime charging. I know people that have that, but I don't think that's been offered since I know people had it in 2020 models. I don't know about more recent models if they still had the free lifetime charging. So there is some of that, but the Tesla chargers aren't outrageous. They're about 50% above the local cost. So if you're in a place where it's normally 14 cents a kilowatt, they're charging 21 cents a kilowatt at the supercharger. Okay. But other places, it would not be unusual to find it being like 40, 50 cents a kilowatt. I'm not saying that's the norm. Okay.
Yeah.
But I have heard stories, and over in the United Kingdom, they have a problem in that if you are using public chargers all the time, it's more expensive than buying gas at the moment.
Yeah,
but that's in the UK. But that's because those charging companies are trying to actually at least break even on their equipment.
I'm sure that infrastructure is insane. I know that another adoption problem is going to be, I think Gen X probably more. I know a lot. I'm a millennial. I know a lot of millennials that like chargers, that like some of the old school American muscle too. But it seems especially Gen X and boomers love those cars, and it's going to be hard to get them to give them up. I mean, not everybody's driving a supercar around, but another issue, and I saw y'all reference this on another episode of the idea that the World Economic Forum has vaguely hinted at their specific plans for electric kill switches. I know those are coming to gasoline cars, but if you had an older gasoline car, I don't think they would be able to micro target you. And I know this is like all hypothetical, but I don't think they'd be able to micro target you as easily as they could with an electric car. And that might be something that never happens, but in there's a lot of people's minds, they're thinking, I refuse to get in something that has an easy electronic where I can be conveniently micro-targeted for using too much carbon this month. So that's an issue.
Well, I haven't heard about it, from that perspective, but the thing is, they're in the United States, they're going to require these electronic kill switches in all the cars, and I believe that's starting next year, or is it 26?
I think, yeah,
it's
coming.
So it doesn't. Tesla could turn off your Tesla right now. Okay,
yeah,
they have that capability, but they're not turning that over to the government. So
yeah, I mean, I trust Elon Musk. I mean, I don't feel great about Neuralink, but so far the guy's playing Pong and he seems happy. So,
the only people that they're testing Neuralink on are people who have, they've had some severe handicaps.
Yeah.
And
can only
where
get
there's a
better for
possibility,
them. Yeah.
where it could only get better. And so that's made it kind of an interesting process to see where they're going with that.
I kind of agree with his idea. He thinks that the only chance we have of AI not developing its own independent goals and outsmarting us is if we integrate AI in our brains to not let machine AI, silicon AI dominate us. And he was just discussing when you tell a robot to go get you a glass of orange juice, one of the implicit goals it has to learn is to not die in order to deliver your orange juice. So crazy. I mean, I know that's kind of adjacent to electric vehicles again, but they just think about Elon Musk and all the AI, everything that's going on. But I like him. I like what he's done with X. It's been wonderful to hear people yelling at each other from both sides, and a lot of nice like tech companies on there. If you search, like doing all kind of cool stuff.
It's been
nice.
What is that expression about? The internet has made it easy to get upset at somebody that can't reach out and punch you in the face.
Mike Tyson said that. Is
that may be, it may have been Tyson that said that, but it's always, I know in mixed martial arts, they have the expression that doesn't matter how skilled everybody's game plan changes once you've been punched in the face. So
there it is. Yeah.
But it is, the internet makes people less civil. There's no question about that. And I have not published some of the messages we've had in the chat. That some of them really don't apply to our show. So I really, don't know about that.
I just went to them. I was on the recording tab, and now I'm seeing some of them.
So there are some rumors that Elon can leave Tesla. What are the chances of that? I think what we're more likely to see is Elon to try to focus a little more on Tesla, but you never know. He might bring somebody else in as a CEO. It's really been his baby for years. And, I don't know. The thing is, SpaceX needs him too. You look at it. He actually, if you ever heard him talk, he couldn't find the right space engineers to start off with, and he went and did it all himself.
Space has always been his goal. And you look at from his youth and talking about it, like, I want to build rockets. Like, I want to go to space. I want to go to the moon. So his long con, maybe not con, but his long play, with everything with this is space. Like, that's what SpaceX is what he has always wanted to do in there. So I think I could see that happening more of stepping away, from some of these other ventures and focusing a little bit more on that as it starts to come to fruition a little bit more. But it's funny, I saw a documentary on him. It's like, as a kid, he's sitting there talking like, I want to build rockets. Like, I want to go to space. This is what I want to do. And he's made it. he's gotten himself there.
Amazing to see those rockets be able to land. I think they said that saves like 100-fold or something. These two questions for you guys, one for each of you. David, what do you think is necessary policy-wise from Congress or an executive order to prevent this Chinese auto domination to the extent that it's a national security threat? Or the answer may be none of those things. Let the free market do its thing. Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm really pro-US, so I really want to see, those jobs stay in the United States. I think that the tariffs probably need to scale. Like, so let's say that, Biden passed, has implemented this 100% tariff, which seems a bit excessive, but we can't let the big three not try to be competitive. And the problem is right now, a lot of, Ford stopped making cars, for God's sakes. All they make now are SUVs and trucks. Okay. And so at some point, and they are talking about it. We heard Jim Farber talk about he's going to bring a $25,000 EV Ford car to market. Okay, don't know what that's going to look like yet. I haven't seen any mock-ups, anything like that. But he knows he's got to do it because
Ford's CEO.
Yeah, or Jim Farley.
Okay.
Jim Farley.
Okay.
I said Farley. Anyways, but Tesla is planning to bring a $25,000 smaller EV to market in the United States next year. Okay, so he knows he's going to have to compete on that. But they also see what's going on overseas. So I think that maybe those tariffs are going to need to scale down. I mean, Trump had already put a 25% tariff on Chinese auto manufacturing. It wasn't specifically EVs, but it was on Chinese auto manufacturing. And, that really wasn't, quite enough. But Green New Deal is a scam. It's interesting. I see stuff like that. Some of that gets a little carried away. And whenever I look back at Solyndra, and that was obviously a boondoggle to enrich, some people. Then the company went bankrupt. That really gave green energy a just terrible look in the media. I don't know if you remember Solyndra. But
some of these comments you might be getting from my channel, but okay. There's people that are skeptical of, and I think this does exist. It doesn't derail the future energy of what I think is ultimately, as I mentioned, nuclear, but also renewables on the way to that. But yeah, just kickbacks, and all of Congress does this. They award their friends contracts, and then in turn, their friends that they're making all this money with the contracts give them money to fund their reelection campaign, and the cycle continues. And I think green energy has been abused a lot in that way, and people see that. I mean, it's been abused in oil too, but it's been very clear in green energy in some instances. Like I think about who was Bill Clinton's vice president?
Al Gore.
Al Gore.
His house, he's like, the solar caps are going to, not the ice caps are going to melt. And his electric bill is like, I don't know how much it was, $3,000 or $4,000 to light his plants or something like that.
Yeah. Well, we all like to make fun of him flying around in his plane to tell us to stop, burning gas
on our planes.
So we get the hypocrisy of some stuff. I wanted to answer, you had somebody talking about I can't find a two-door car anymore without being a stick shift that takes premium gas. So right now, because of the Inflation Reduction Act, there's some deals out there on used cars. And Cadillac in 2014 to 2016 made this car called the ELR. It was $75,000 10 years ago. Okay. You can buy one of these. It is a plug-in hybrid car. Okay. It's got a 37-mile battery, plus it gets about 40 miles per gallon. It's 2 doors. It's an awesome looking Cadillac. And you can find them all over. If you do some searching online, there's not going to be a lot of them. There was only about 2,000 of them made, period, for about $15,000 to $20,000. And they qualify, if you make under $75,000 a year, they qualify for the $4,000 tax credit for a used car, which you can use as part of the down payment. And it's an amazing looking car. And you basically got a $75,000, and a lot of those, because Cadillac's a brand that's bought by grandmas, a lot of them have like 40,000 miles on them. And I have not seen one for sale yet that was a high mileage, like 100,000 plus mile car. They were all bought by people who just didn't drive very much. I'm just saying it's something definitely to look at, but it's a Cadillac ELR, and you can find a crazy bargain on one of those right now. But
Cadillac.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was the answer to that question, is more tariffs to make it more difficult for them to trade. Mike, what do you think? The same question to you about the energy grid. Is there any policy that would what I hear is that it's a web of it. It's old, and you're having to piece things together and think about it way more difficultly than, that's probably not a real word, difficultly, more difficult than as if you were starting from a new. So is there policy to help on this, or just get out of the way for the government?
We've talked about it a whole bunch, and I guess never stated it plainly, but I think nuclear. I do think nuclear is a good path forward, and figuring out how we can do that. The problem with nuclear is affordability. They permitted the first plant in a long time in Georgia, about a decade ago, and the cost just kept going up and going up and going up to the point of like adding a zero to it, and putting it through. And it's the challenge with nuclear. And there's a reason we want to make them safe. There's a reason we want to get it cleaned up, but we need to figure out how to make that more competitive from an upfront development and cost standpoint. Just because it checks so many dang boxes. The problem with solar, the problem with wind, and it's the argument you and I, anybody can make, man on the street can make. What's the problem with solar? Well, what happens when the sun doesn't shine? Well, what's the problem with wind? Well, sometimes the wind doesn't blow, and at least the sun shines predictably. Okay, it's gonna come up in the morning, it's gonna go down at night. Wind's unpredictable. Yeah, you can make some assumptions about it, but it's going to stop. And that's the challenge the grid's having right now. It's so dang dynamic, where we've had these baseload plants from coal and nuclear and everywhere that were just workhorses. You turn them on and they run for a year, and you turn them off and do 2 weeks of maintenance and then turn them back on, and they just run and they run and they run and they run. And that's one of the solutions that nuclear helps provide. Now, people are going to say, well, storage, battery technology, all these, great. It's a great solution. It's going to work. It's going to take a long time. You're going to have to distribute it. But I really do think getting back to that base load workhorse type model where, like, I don't want to worry about it. I don't want to have to actively manage the grid and actively do this every second of the day. But, okay, a cloud went through over here. The wind stopped blowing a little bit more down here. Turn this plant on, do that. Like, just set it and forget it. The old Ron Popeil. Can we just install some more nuclear and let them ride, let them be workhorses of the grid again, and then supplement with the solar and the wind and everything like that. It's all good things, but they just check so many boxes when you look at it. It burns clean, doesn't burn.
Yeah,
it's hot clean.
So are we more, less, or equally as vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses as other Western countries, our infrastructure?
We're all in the same boat on that.
Okay.
I don't think
not any worse. Okay.
I don't think we're any worse than anybody else. Our grid material is the same now. One of the challenges there's two of them. There's electromagnetic pulses, and then there's geomagnetic disturbances, which over 2 months ago, the northern lights popping up everywhere. I used to do geomagnetic disturbance analysis on the grid, and for me,
do you have any downs?
Yeah, it was exciting because it's like, whoa, oh no, like that's what's it going to do to the grid? It's pretty, but that can have potential grid impacts. So it's in place. Rules and regulations are in place by federal rulemaking agencies. Like, you have to be accounting for this. You have to build with these things in mind. We have to put in security measures, metrics, whatever it is. They ain't that old. I worked on those standards in my career, so probably should have been in place a long time ago. But they are in place. Those things are starting to pop up. They're starting to be considered more and more. To your original question, like, are we more vulnerable? Well, yes, because we got a bigger target on our back. More people are likely going to be going after the U.S. grid than the Canadian grid.
100%.
Just because we're the U.S.
There's supersonic missiles. Theoretically, they're non-nuclear supersonic missiles will be in Cuba and Venezuela soon. So that's great.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's out to start a nuclear war anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, unless Ukraine starts hitting Moscow, the decision for us to allow Ukraine to use our missiles inside of the Russian border was just such an insane escalation, because it's not really us controlling them now. Who knows what some person in Ukraine may do, but that's a whole nother topic too.
It is. And there's a lot of things we obviously could talk about on a show. I did want to, before we were done, because we only got a few more minutes, I want to talk about a little bit about current policy. In that, I don't normally like to talk true political topics. I know that's what your channel is all about, and I wanted to get your opinion about what you think about, because there's three areas where Biden is sort of like trying to adopt Trump's platform, and this is really weird because when Biden first got into office, he immediately tried to reverse all of these actions that Trump had taken as president, where he was shutting down Keystone Pipeline, he was doing all the other things. And since then, he's now opening up to more oil exploration and more oil drilling in the United States. Now, it hasn't necessarily prompted a whole lot of investment because a lot of your oil companies are like, hey, wait a minute, we don't want to spend this money on development. Now, I attend a fair amount of economic forums, and last year and this year, oil growth, even with the massive expansion of EVs worldwide, people don't realize how fast they're growing worldwide. They're not growing as fast in the United States as they are in other countries. Oil still went up 5% each year in total usage worldwide. Okay, so the oil companies aren't hurting. The oil companies are still drilling. They're still pumping out oil. Even and cars only account for like 25% of oil usage. Okay, so it's even if everything goes to EV, you still have other transportation uses. It's used in fertilizer. There's all kinds of other things, other chemicals that oil is used for. I mean, obviously we have asphalt roads all over the country. There's a lot of things. Oh, what's that?
Plastics.
Yeah, plastics. I mean, there's all kinds of things it's used for that aren't just, powering cars. But it makes. But what I was getting at is we've got Biden all of a sudden reversed on some of this oil stuff. He imposed a 100% tariff on EVs, which Trump said, he was going to try to stop the Chinese invasion, in the EV space. And although they haven't come into our country in the EV space. Okay. Now, and then the third thing was he's kind of acted like he wants to enforce border security all of a sudden, but nothing really happened with that. That was just talk. But, these are the things that Trump is sort of campaigning on. And I just wanted to get your opinion on what you think was going on there.
Yeah, I mean, with regards to energy, the consumer price index has pretty consistently had like at-home heating, at-home energy has risen a lot. Like I want to say the last report was like 8 or 9% at-home energy usage. I mean, people were seeing that. My opinion is that he had his plan for redoing grid, at least from an outsider's perspective, when I think that was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, or maybe that was part of the infrastructure package. Everything seemed really quickly. And I mean, I guess if one believes that the climate is changing, you would act that quickly. I don't believe that, but I could understand how someone would. But energy costs are so high. It's always the economy. I was looking at the data between abortion after Roe being overturned versus the economy, and I was actually shocked that the economy is more important because Roe was such a big issue in polling. But I think it comes down to energy. He's trying to get things as affordable as possible because in political science, about 5 months out, about right now actually, is when voter attitudes set in, and you got to have a miracle past that to change voter attitudes. With the border, I mean, that's like, I believe that they're trying to give corporations really cheap labor, Democrats and Republicans in Congress, and they're going to undercut our wages, and it's going to be more people than there are some jobs. I know we're facing a population crisis, but the immigration's not going to solve what is a divide in culture between men and women, also birth control, so many things. But he's essentially trying to put a Band-Aid on the things that he's pulling the worst in, and one of those is inflation, and it's impacted energy a lot.
Yeah, well, I think the number one place where people notice it at the moment, until EVs take over, is at the gas pump. because people are constantly looking when they're driving down the road, those prices on gas. And there was a little bit there where it came back down a little bit, and then, but it's never going to come back down to that $1.75 was 3 years ago. But it's interesting kind of to see that. We were going to review that video, but we don't really have time to do it now. But that's okay. That's okay. And because Mike usually has a hard stop about now, and but this has been great. I've loved having you on here, David. So
yeah, great talking to you, gentlemen.
Yeah, and we appreciate all the folks that have been watching today too. But we've run out of time because we're already at an hour, and that went by real quick.
Everybody, so it gets that, like all the channels, so it gets the algorithm pushing the video out. It doesn't. Nuclear energy and renewables doesn't have to be woke. It doesn't have to be partisan. There are people on both sides that want energy that's more effective and cheaper. So I love oil as well, but don't be afraid of fusion and all the good stuff.
There's a lot of things. The things that Mike and I usually talk about. We're talking about things that are coming. They're coming whether you like it or not. It's not like it's a Republican or Democrat thing. It's just what's happening worldwide. And people a lot of times they think it's some kind of conspiracy, but it's a matter of we're both familiar with the fact we have a nuclear power plant here in Omaha, and it's shut down because we can produce wind power cheaper than we can produce nuclear power. Okay,
that's nice. I mean, it's like you said earlier. They put issues in a basket. They need things to divide the parties to have this, what I see is not a real rivalry. I think a lot of them are just having, not all of them, but some of them are having dinner after they're done with that debate in Congress.
Right.
No, I got them there.
No, I get it. I honestly feel that politics in our country is political theater. So much of it is just drama for the media. I mean, some of the stuff just gets absurd and grandstanding. But anyways, folks, once again, I can carry on for a long time. I want to thank you for being on here. I'm going to go ahead and